Okay, let's switch to Birch Creek, where we also tested this approach. Birch Creek is in southern Idaho, part of the Bear River Range, only about an hour away from where we live in Logan, Utah. And this was a study that was initiated by Jay Wild, who is a rancher. And this is his ranch that's at the base of Birch Creek. Jay grew up on this ranch, and then he left after high school, and he came back after somewhere between 30 and 40 years and took over the the, the ranch from his parents. This is actually an intensive grazing approach that Jay has been using to greatly alter the quantity and quality of vegetation in the system. And through this process of trying to improve the environment while maintaining his business, he started thinking more about conservation. And something that he was really interested in trying to do was to restore the riverscape of Birch Creek. And this is the problem in Birch Creek. This is Birch Creek in June, and you can see that it goes dry. When he was growing up, this flowed year round. His parents told him in the mid 80s that for some reason the stream started drying up. So Jay started recording the day of the year that Birch Creek went dry. And so this is day of the year and Julian date. What I was able to do was predict the day that Birch Creek went dry by comparing it to the cumulative amount of flow during the spring freshet in the Blacksmith Fork, which is a nearby tributary. So this encompasses the amount of snowpack, precipitation, and temperature, and all those things that affect the amount of water that you might expect in a stream. And what you can see is we predicted the day that it would dry up with an R-square of 0.98. So as Jay was trying to figure out how to get water back in the stream, something that occurred to him was that when he was growing up, there were beaver ponds, but there were no longer beaver in the system. And so he tried his own experiment to bring beaver back in 2008 and 2009, where he released about 11 beavers, but they didn't take. But he didn't let this idea go, and he found Joe's website, emailed Joe. Joe responded, surprisingly, almost immediately, and Joe and I went up there to take a look at Birch Creek. And what we found was that there's plenty of forage for beavers, so that's probably not the reason why the beavers were either killed or disappeared. But what we thought was there is no deep water habitat anywhere in Birch Creek, and so that provided risk to predators. And so basically Jay was just throwing out these walking hot dogs that were susceptible to predators since they had no refugia in deep water. So our strategy was to build beaver dam analogs and provide immediate habitat and refuge for the beaver. Once we built a series of these, about 19 of them in 4 different places, we released 5 in 2015 and 4 in 2016 for a total of 9 beavers. This is the location of where we built these beaver dam complexes. This was all done by volunteer work, and then in workshops we built some more beaver dam complexes. And the idea was we built enough BDAs to give beavers somewhat of a choice of where they can move to and start to take up home. We released the beavers. These were captured by IDF&G, and then we released them in Birch Creek, and immediately they started building dams, and within 3 years they built 140 dams. And this is an example of what these dams do. So this was Birch Creek here, and what you can see is that water has backed up behind the dams, is now spilling out over this floodplain. This is a meadow, these large ponds, and so you can imagine that the amount of water storage in these ponds is quite big, but probably even bigger is the amount of water stored in these sediments in this valley bottom. And so that is basically a reservoir that can then slowly release throughout the summer. Well, here's that same relationship And then this is the diamonds are after beaver and BDAs were introduced into the system. And what you can see is an increase of about 42 days in the length of time that Birch Creek flowed after the beavers started getting established. But wait, 2019 we actually saw that Birch Creek ran year round. It was somewhat of a high water year, but it was expected that this would have dried up in early July, and in fact it didn't dry up until all the water got locked up in the wintertime when everything started freezing. Um, so during the summer season it flowed the entire year, um, which is the first time in 40 years that that has occurred. So this is pretty encouraging. What else did these beaver dams do? Well, here's the water depth in Birch. Like I said, it was pretty shallow, no deep water habitat. But when beavers started building dams, they created these deep pools, you know, over a meter deep in some places. This is just one little complex. And they also widen the channel considerably. And so this is depth times width, kind of the cross-sectional area. And you can see very little difference in the original Birch Creek. But with the addition of dams, we saw a much greater increase in water volume. And did the fish respond to that? Well, we actually had a little bit of information to determine if this did provide some benefit to the native Bonneville cutthroat trout here that are listed as well, they're not listed, they're considered a sensitive species. So we had Forest Service did some surveys that showed that in many reaches in Birch Creek there was hardly any, so very low densities. And then in 2019 we surveyed both beaver dam complexes and free-flowing reaches. And what we found in the free-flowing reaches, that there was an average about 10 fish per 100 meters, but 150 fish. So we saw this massive increase in the number of fish in these beaver dam complexes that's resulting in an overall population increase in Birch Creek. And not only that, these fish are considerably larger. So here's some of the science behind the development and application of beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, and how that promotes beaver dam activity. And if we can get beaver dam activity going, that we think that's going to have a lot of benefits to these stream ecosystems, whether it's increase in habitat quality for fish or for other fish and wildlife species. So to conclude, many streams in this country are structurally starved and they're disconnected from their floodplains. We've heard that repeatedly earlier in this workshop. Structure and connected floodplains provide high quality habitat for a lot of aquatic and terrestrial species. Beaver dam analogs can help with that, but beavers are really the masters at adding structure and reconnecting floodplains. This beaver dam activity affects the processes that restore streams and creates resilience to large perturbations. And while we were looking mainly at fish responses, we're starting to see that beavers are an effective tool at addressing multiple restoration goals, such as extending summer flows. Let's keep finding more examples either through monitoring or adaptive management to determine the benefits that beaver provide to stream ecosystems.